Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk About It podcast, brought to you by WeDeliverYourVision.com, the go-to place for delivering your vision and getting traction fast. Welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About podcast. And today, I'm really excited to introduce you to Alex Lazarow. Welcome to the podcast, Alex.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, awesome. So just to introduce yourself to my audience, Alex, it's probably good to share some of the interesting facts about your book, which I'm really interested to talk about.
Happily, John. So by day, just maybe for context, I'm a global venture capitalist investing in startups in different geographies around the world. I'm physically in the Bay Area, but have invested in companies from Mexico to Brazil to Nigeria to South Africa and in Southeast Asia, et cetera. And so it's really my passion for my day job and outside of work as well. So I have been teaching entrepreneurship for a number of years, and I just wrote this book, Out-innovate, how global entrepreneurs from Delhi to Detroit are rewriting the rules of Silicon Valley. It came out about a year ago with the Harvard Business Review Press. And the thesis really is that the best of entrepreneurship, it's global, not just Silicon Valley. And yet no one is talking about the emerging set of best practice of the best entrepreneurial leaders around the world. They're scaling startups and ecosystems that just look different than Silicon Valley, that have less capital, that might have less depth of been there, done that, trained human capital, that might face more macroeconomic shocks. And in those contexts, in these contexts of more difficulty, more challenges, emerge best practices that I believe yield more successful and also more resilient startups. And there are lessons that entrepreneurs around the world should learn from each other, but also Silicon Valley should learn from them as well.
Yes. Yeah, it's a great topic. And I want to unpack that a little bit for our listeners, because you raise a really good point that problems make us be more innovative. You know, when it's easy, we don't need to change. We don't need to do anything differently. So what I'm hearing is that you're seeing, you know, the classic Silicon Valley, Bay Area hub of amazing innovation, whereas in reality, what we're seeing is some really strong innovation practices outside of Silicon Valley in different areas. And just break that down for me. What are some of the strengths you're seeing outside of Silicon Valley?
Let me even start by making it quantitative, and making it really real for your listeners. In 2013, 4 startup ecosystems had created $1 billion business. Today, 91 startup ecosystems have created $1 billion business.
Wow.
These aren't just big businesses. These are the biggest businesses. The biggest education technology company in the world is from India. The biggest neobank in the world is from Brazil. The biggest robotic process automation business came from Romania. And the biggest super app and ride sharing and social commerce player is from China. And so this is really what's happening, is that the best of innovation is global. And some of these startups are inspiring entrepreneurs and innovators everywhere. And one of the dimensions that I think is really exciting and I think flies in the face of Silicon Valley conventional wisdom is this notion of being a creator versus disruptor.
Right.
In Silicon Valley, we're obsessed with this notion of disrupting. You're either disrupting or being disrupted. In many startup ecosystems around the world, I believe the best entrepreneurs are creating industries, and we can double click on that if that's helpful, but are building industries for the mass market where it doesn't exist before.
Right. Yeah. And I love that, because disruption is trendy, right? People think, all right, I must disrupt. I must come into this market. It's like the blue ocean strategy. I must do something radically different. And I like your take on create rather than disrupt, because creation is almost incremental innovation. Something's working okay, or maybe not working as well, but you're creating it and creating that innovation out of that small incremental changes.
Yeah, no, so 100%. And by the way, it's interesting where this disruption philosophy came from, right? It wasn't even about tech. It was research from Harvard Business School, from Clayton Christensen, about the steel industry. And he noticed these little mini mills at the bottom end of the market, serving customers that were otherwise ignored. And over time, they got bigger and bigger and served more and more of the market. And then the big integrated steel mills lost to this new approach. And we've adopted it. And it's got this emotional appeal, this David versus Goliath kind of thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what's interesting is in many emerging startup ecosystems, the problem set is different, right? There's 2 billion people that are financially excluded. There is lack of health insurance. There's more acute pain on climate change, whatever it is. And in those markets, I'm observing an orientation of entrepreneurs towards a different set of problems. And I'll give you one very tactical example. In Silicon Valley, less than 20% of unicorns are tied to programs like financial inclusion or health for the mass market or agribusiness or what have you. In many emerging startups, because the numbers are flipped. In sub-Saharan Africa, we did a study and it was over 60% in those same domains among the leading startups. And so it's more than just a framing mechanism. It's actually real in problem selection. And I think problem selection is really where the startup journey starts and why I think this is such an important dynamic.
Yes, exactly. And then problem selection is absolutely key. I found working with my clients as well, they want to be known to be innovative, but these are typically small, medium companies. They've built on an idea, they're growing fast, and now they're getting bogged down with the process and some of the bureaucracy and just growing fast, but not managing it well. And typically the calls I get are, how do we just organize ourselves? How do we just get our trains running on time? And that in itself is an element of innovation, because to your point, it's a problem we're trying to solve. It's something we need to do incrementally. We don't have to go out to a new market. We don't have to launch a brand new product, although that's one of their goals. First, we just need to internally innovate to work better and more efficiently. And I'm just wondering have you seen experiences like that with some of these innovators you've seen around just getting their ducks in a row?
It's important to remember for a startup. And by the way, a startup is different than a small business, right? Like, yes. And with startups, I think that they are not companies, right? They are projects. They are experiments in search of a business. And they are trying to figure out, I've got this technology solution or this whatever solution. What's my market? How much should I charge? How should I sell? Who are my partners? And over time, they develop that. And that hopefully then develops into a business model with a go-to-market motion on how you're going to reach customers with unit economics that you measure, et cetera. And I think that along that journey, the importance of getting those ducks in a row, like for instance, really nailing, well, around my business model, what are my unit economics? How much am I willing to spend on cost of acquisition to get Y dollars of lifetime value or whatever metrics you're going to start using? That becomes increasingly important. It's one of the things I spend a lot of my time as a venture capitalist with entrepreneurs, particularly at the stage I invest in, right? I'm not investing in two people in a garage. I'm investing when there's a little bit of a business, there's real revenue, there's some things to measure. I spend a lot of time not just understanding the big dream and the idea and how it can change the world, but also what's working today, what's not, how can we improve, what are the things that could unlock growth and scale over the next couple of years, and how do we really help entrepreneurs with that vision. And so I think this is one where investors can also be helpful, working alongside founders to try to support them in building the nuts and bolts of the business side as well in the implementation.
Yes, and I like the fact that you use implementation, startups are projects. My background is projects, IT projects, and now applying that to help some businesses grow. And it's that project structure which I find is invaluable, because what I find is as soon as you get funding for an idea, a lot of folks, companies just want to jump into buying something. They feel they have to spend it. They feel they have to show something for the money, which is typically technology. They see all this exciting technology, especially when you talk about innovation. And most of my time is actually rewinding that. It's getting back to your point earlier. What is the problem you're solving? How are we going to work through this? What's the team to support that? What's the roadmap for working with that technology? So I'm just wanted to explore that a bit with you as well. When you're funding a company or getting into that VC space with them, what are you seeing almost the pitfalls of people starting out? Once they've got the money, then what do they do next that they shouldn't?
Yeah, well, I will say, so one of my biases in the book, I introduced this concept of a camel, which is a start. It's a little bit of a reaction towards another animal, the unicorn.
Right.
Where a unicorn is a numerical value, right? Just pure and simple, it's $1 billion business. But embedded within that is a philosophy on how to get there, a philosophy of growth at all costs, where it's okay to burn unsustainably in service of growth, where it's okay to sacrifice unit economics in service of growth, where it's okay to have a short-term lens. And I believe that the best startups take this approach of what I call the camel, but it's this notion of taking the long-term view, right? Like a camel is an animal that can survive in the harshest deserts and places all over the planet.
Mm.
But when times are good, it can guzzle water faster than
Yes.
any other thing in the desert. It can sprint across the desert. And that's really the lens that I think startups should take, where we're built on a foundation of strong, sustainable unit economics, where we understand the business and we're building towards something where we manage burn. We're not trying to get ahead of our skis. We raise, by the way, I think venture capital is an incredible tool. And, caveat, I am a venture capitalist. I don't think it's for everyone, and I don't think it's for every company at every time. And so I think that it should not be the default option. You shouldn't depend on it, on the merry-go-round of it. You should really understand where the levers of your business and what you're specifically going to do with that money. And so to your question, John, of, well, like, what are the things you should do, and how I would counsel it on, if you have money, I would understand, well, why are you raising the money in the first place? What is it you're going to do? Is it to spend money on acquisition, and you spend X dollars to get Y dollars of revenue over the next little while? Is it because you need to build X thing for product development, and investing today versus waiting a little bit brings a certain set of revenue or something else forward? What is the driver for that? And it's with a really strong business case on those drivers that then I think is a good reason to raise venture capital, take the dilution, really accelerate the trajectory on which you're on.
Yeah, it's having that clarity on the goals, right? Because people are saying, well, sorry, not just the goals, but also the structure to achieve those goals. Because it's they're getting the money. Okay, what are you going to spend it on? Why? To your point, why? And then that camel analogy is great, because it's not just the camels can, as you said, run fast when it's good and drink all the water, but they can also sustain when resources are scarce. Yeah. And what I find in working with my clients is that's actually two different skill sets. There are very few people who can do both, especially with smaller companies where you have that visionary who's saying, I want to go here, I'm going to make a real impact on the world, and they have that energy and drive. But then they have a team behind them who needs to follow through, keep organized, get the ideas delivered and pushed out to the customers. Having one person play that role is very rare. I don't often see that skill in one person. So having the right team kick it off and then transition to that long-term camel support team is absolutely key.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation.
Yeah, exactly. It's because people think a project is a very unique endeavor. You start up a project, you get excited because you're doing something new, be it a small company or a new product or service. But then you need to build in that long-term. Okay, the momentum's moved away to more if you like, the daily operations. It's the sustainability of keeping that product or service going day in, day out, the reliability. So typically that project team needs to move on to the next project. And that's where when I'm coaching around innovation and helping companies improve their services, the team to stand up that new service is often different, is typically very different from the long-term sustainment team as well. So, so in terms of just going back to the global the global experience you're seeing as well, is that part of your passion as well? Is traveling to those places? Is that part of why the book comes in?
I guess there's two reasons. I think, yes, personal passion. If I wasn't a venture capitalist, I would have studied economic development and continue to work on a bunch of these questions just in a different capacity. But also, I think the reason I'm passionate about it with the innovation lens is this notion that the best ideas are coming from anywhere and scaling everywhere. And cross-pollination is a real thing, where we're seeing ideas come from India, for instance, around small business enablement. There's this incredible business called Udaan that powers micro entrepreneurs. And now we're seeing that business model scale all over the world in different manifestations. I think that I'm seeing those kind of things really happen more and more. And, honestly, I'm really excited about supporting entrepreneurs. And I'm even more excited when those entrepreneurs are building highly impactful businesses. And some of the most impactful businesses to some of the world's biggest challenges are coming from and entrepreneurs are creating these ideas everywhere around the world. So part of the reason that I love the travel, both physically, but also via Zoom more and more in this new digital enabled world, is because it's a catalyst to connect some of the dots and help entrepreneurs in a broader set of places. So I think that's really the reason it's my passion.
Yeah, love it. And a couple of things spring to mind out of that. I'm a big fan of, and I'll probably mess up the quote, but I think it was someone like Brian Tracy or Tony Robbins saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So by surrounding yourself with a certain ecosystem of people, you naturally norm to that level. Whereas when you're saying, hey, there's experience in globally that we need to look at here, and be it Delhi, Detroit, or wherever, that's changing up the experience. So as long as it's aligned to where you want to get to, being exposed to those new ways of doing things is incredibly valuable.
Yeah. So first, I hope I didn't lower your average too much with this podcast interview, but second, I actually really believe that, right? I think that there's a huge opportunity to be exposed to different ideas. Mm-hmm. And at this exact moment where seemingly borders are going up around the world, I think this exchange of ideas to solving some of the biggest problems is more important than ever. So I'm a huge believer in that.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to refer back to a recent article you posted as well about Ernest Shackleton and his tour of duty down to the Antarctic. Mm-hmm. And I really didn't appreciate how much trauma and how much resilience him and his crew needed to go through that. And I think resilience is often undervalued in innovative space, because everyone gets excited about that initial idea. Everyone gets excited about maybe some funding coming in, but there's a long-term road you need to walk to get that product, service, idea, business delivered. And the Shackleton story was inspiring, and I'd encourage any of our listeners to go check that out, because I didn't appreciate how much him and his crew went through.
Oh no, totally, and certainly I think it's an inspiration for startup founders who will go through their ups and downs. And for your listeners that might be interested in the Shackleton story you're referring to, I have a little newsletter called 99% Tech on Substack, and wrote a piece a little bit for my own trip to Antarctica late last year, and honestly, in this incredible desert of a landscape, hearing the story of Shackleton's year sojourn, losing his boat, being stuck on the ice, and then bringing everyone home with not a single casualty, is really a testament of his personal resilience, and also an opportunity to learn an incredible amount.
And also making some really hard decisions around leaving certain members of his team behind, because he knew taking everyone from once they were first stranded to then go overseas to get back to safety, taking the whole team was not going to work out. And also picking very specific people to leave behind and not leave behind, because they would either be disruptive or they would energize. And ideally pushing him into decisions to say, I'd actually like this group of people, but in reality, this is best for the group, for the team. And making those hard decisions was in that environment when you're faced with life and death in the Antarctic is quite frankly amazing.
Yeah, this is in some ways, right, the role of a CEO. Right. As you build a startup, figuring out the team dynamics, figuring out allocation resources, all these kind of questions. So much to learn. So great story to learn from.
Yeah. And as we start to round out this podcast, I want to ask you in a second around some of the 2 or 3 lessons or takeaways you'd leave with our audience, and just to maybe seed that around what we were just talking about there, around as a project manager, business owner, leader, sometimes we have to make decisions and we don't like to, because we maybe have investment in the team, investment of the project. And it's my number one advice is don't wait too long. If you have a niggle around a decision to be made about a certain personality on your team or a certain direction your project's going, it's never going to get better. It's always going to get worse. It's that course correction as a pilot. If you don't course correct to get to your destination, you're going to be hundreds of miles off the destination. Yeah. So it's just my encouragement to make those decisions quickly and hard decisions where you have to.
Yeah, I resonate with that. Maybe I'll make 2 other observations. The first is for startup strategy, and the second is the future of innovation. On the first, I think one of the macro themes in the book is this notion of doing more with less, and that can actually be an advantage. Less resources force you to be a camel that make you more resilient. Right. As a really big example, or more challenges in your ecosystem force you to be a creator. That actually might unlock some bigger opportunities for your business. And so I think that's one. The second observation I'll make is one just on the future of innovation and why I'm so excited to be doing this job at this moment. It used to be that it was really expensive and difficult to start a business. And today, with a bunch of
Right.
enabling technology, it's possible to do it anywhere around the world.
Mm.
And as I mentioned, I think the best practice around innovation is starting to come from everywhere. And we might look to have a sense of where the future might go to another industry. And it's not the technology industry, it's the car industry. 100 years ago, the innovators of the future were not in the Bay Area, they were in Detroit. And hundreds of entrepreneurs are building car companies. Look what happened, fast forward, right? Today, Detroit is still a place where we make cars, but the capital of raw engineering might be in Germany, and the sexiest sports cars are from Italy, and the most reliable cars are made in Japan. And by the way, we've created just-in-time manufacturing, a best practice approach from Japan that is now permeated the rest of the world. I think the same thing is going to happen in Silicon Valley, right? We're still going to make companies here, but we will also make companies all over the world, and the best of things will come from different places, and that trend is going to accelerate. And so that's my prediction of how the world of innovation will evolve in the coming years.
Yes, and like you say, it's so easy to start a business. It never is the time being more opportunistic and needs for new services and products out there. And then once it gets going, is then maintaining that resilience to keep going, because so many of us have great ideas. And that's where I often help companies in terms of keeping the project momentum going, the idea momentum going, because everyone gets excited at the beginning and then it starts to wane, starts to fall off a bit. But to really keep going, that's when you know you're going to get to a result. It might not be the result you expect, but you're going to get to a result if you keep going long enough. Perfect. 100%. Awesome. Well, this is really good, Alex. Really appreciate your time. And if our listeners want to find out more about you or get more information on your book, where could they find you?
Well, thank you for having me. So for anyone that wants to subscribe to my newsletter, you could do so at alexlazarow.com, ALEXLAZAROW.com. And my book, Out-Innovate, How Global Entrepreneurs from Delhi to Detroit Are Rewriting the Rules of Silicon Valley, can be bought anywhere we could buy books. Given the pandemic and this crazy moment, I encourage you to consider supporting your local bookstore. And we really appreciate the support and excited to hear what you think.
Yes, awesome. Yeah, I'll post some links to those in the comments for the show notes as well. So
awesome.
In the meantime, great to have you, Alex, and have a great rest of the day.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Yep, you too. Speak to you soon. Thanks for listening to the Let's Talk About It podcast, brought to you by WeDeliverYourVision.com, the go-to place for delivering your vision and getting traction fast. Until the next episode, let's get it done.